Hey guys, I'm having some issues. Some technical issues. I hope you can hear me. Alright, what is going on? Why can't you see my beautiful face? Alright, give me a sec. Come on. Yeah, camera gone. I know. I understand. I'm trying, guys. I'm trying. Why doesn't it work? Hmm. Alright. Let's see. Disconnect. Disconnect. Doop, 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 doop. Why isn't it showing up? Why? The Windows sound effect is so soothing. Okay. I'm just gonna play that. What is going on? How about turning it off and on again? Turning what off and on? Okay, does anyone know anything about Streamlabs? Alright, maybe I can show you my screen. Do, 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 do. Okay, help it. Let's see. Hopefully there's no incriminating information. Alright. So here's a live screen. Okay. No, I can't show you. No, I can't show you. So in my cam here, but if I click here, you won't see my face. You just see a black screen. But I can add a new source, which is my webcam. And here's my webcam. But you can't see anything. It's blank. My webcam is on. What's going on, guys? Da-da. It sees the device, but it's a blank screen. Why? Why? Media source? Oh, no. There's only one, right? Video capture device. Any other sources? Why does it say activate? What do you mean? Ooh. Existing source. My camera's on, but the lights are off. I'm such a dummy. Oh! Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay, hold on. Okay. Okay, we're good. Wait, it was... No, it wasn't like that before. Yeah, okay, whatever. Yay! Activate might be important. No, it was already activated before. I don't know why. Dun, 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 dun. What's up? What's up, guys? Oh my god. Starting off really well here. Starting off really freaking well. Alright. Alright, how you guys doing? How's the chat doing? What's up, Benjamin? Is the lens cap on? Thanks for all the help, guys. Who said activate? That person was very helpful. What's up, Nikki? Nice of you to join. What's up, Greek yogurt? Hey, Mai. I don't look like a yokai? Not now. Try to choke on Wordle. Oh, you want me to try choke? Alright. Don't tell me what the word is, okay? I don't know what is going on. My neighbors are like they're moving the furniture around, okay? They're really loud over there, okay? Either someone's having really crazy sex or someone's getting murdered next door, okay? Either way is none of my business. None of my business. They're so loud next door. I don't know what they're doing. To be honest, it's highly entertaining so far. You're entertained by my frustration with technology. All right. Let's start off with our ritual Wordle. Let's do a Wordle. Last time we did Wordle, that was like what? We took 3 minutes or something? 2 minutes? 3 minutes? That was a record. Okay, we're gonna break that record today. Both? All right. All right, Wordle. I'm not looking at the chat. All right, we're starting right. All right, 6:14. We're starting right now. Let's see. Oh, someone wanted me to do choke. Oh, that has an E. No, E works. Oh! All right, who was that in chat? You just gave me the answer. Not cool. Someone said use choke. Oh god, he messed it up. That was like 30 seconds. Who was that? Who was that wise guy in chat? Oh well. Not cool. Don't do that again. You know, you guys, did you know this? I thought that this streak, oh shit. I thought that this streak means that the number of games you've won. No, but if you skip a day, you reset the streak. I was so mad. I skipped a day. I skipped a day the other day and I broke my streak. Now it used to be 14, now I'm at 2. Started all over again. This sucks. Yeah, you did do it, Naughty. What the hell? Oh well, at least we're not sitting through 30 minutes of me trying to guess the answer. Alright. Is the camera too high? Need it to be lower? Oh. Okay. Alright, we have this snack today. I don't know what this is, actually. It's still a baksu snack, so we shall see. Ugh. Oh my god. It's a whole fish. Alright. Alright. It looks like a wafer fish. It looks like there's chocolate inside. See that? Let's see. Pretty good. Not bad. All right. That's very it's not too sweet. It's just the right kind of sweetness. The wafers I don't like wafers. The wafers, they break apart all over the place. So I'm gonna have to take a point off for that. This is a 7 out of 10, okay? The chocolate is good though. You want to try it too? Okay, send me your address. I'll mail it to you. You want to take a bite? Okay, here. Just for you, I'm going to bring it to the camera. There you go. Take a bite. Ooh. Yeah. Wow. The resolution. Pretty good. All right. So what happened last week? Okay. In our story. So last week, our hero, Duan Yu, he has absorbed the chi from like a bunch of people. A bunch of high level people, okay? So he has a lot of energy in his body right now. And because of that, his body is in all sorts of pain. Okay, he's He's really uncomfortable. He's in a lot of pain. Um, the emperor sees this, and the emperor takes him to the Heavenly Dragon Monastery, okay, which is the monastery of the Duan family. And the emperor wants these powerful monks there to help him, to help him with his issue, right? To cure him of all this pain. They don't know what's going on, right? Even Duan Yu is not sure what's going on. He doesn't know that he had absorbed all this qi from all these people, right? So they go to the Heavenly Dragon Monastery, but the monks refuse to help him because right now the monks are dealing with their own issue. Okay, this guy named Jiu Mo Zi, or the Enlightened Lord of the Great Wheel. Okay, who is this respected Buddhist monk? He's coming soon to take the Duan family's secret martial arts manual. Okay, this manual called the Divine Sword of the Six Meridians. Okay, sounds very powerful. Okay, I only know 5 meridians. The Enlightened Lord is this respected Buddhist monk, but he seems to be working with this Mu Rongbo guy, who is the guy who's been killing all these people. So, so they know the Enlightened Lord is coming soon, but none of the monks know how to use this divine sword of the 6 meridians technique. Okay, and they want to learn it to fight this dude if he comes and if he causes trouble, right? But they don't know the technique, and it's too powerful for any of them to learn. But they say they're like, well, each person can learn one part of this martial arts manual. Okay, so since there are 6 meridians, you need 6 people. Okay, to learn this martial arts. They only have 5 monks, so the emperor agrees to be the 6th person to learn it in one night, right? But the rule of this monastery is that only a monk of the monastery can learn it. So what the emperor does is the emperor steps down from his throne to become a monk, all right, to learn this martial arts to help the monastery. So the emperor becomes a monk. The 6 monks spend the night looking at this martial arts manual on the wall, and they're practicing it. Okay. Now, meanwhile, Duan Yu is sitting there, or hero is sitting there, forgotten. Okay, in the place, in the room. So he's like he doesn't know, he has nothing to do. He's sitting around. He glances over at the wall, and since he's a smart dude and he has so much chi in him, so much like energy in him right now, so he actually learns the martial arts without even knowing it. Right. So he's just reading over blah blah blah, and he's learning the martial arts. Um, so but he doesn't know it. So the next day, the Enlightened Lord comes, and it seems that he's a friend of this Mu Rongbo guy, okay, who he says is dead. So Mu Rongbo is dead. This Enlightened Lord wants to take their martial arts manual, their secret divine sword technique, to burn it as a sacrifice or as an offering over Mu Rongbo's grave, right? So that's what he wants to do. Now, there's a lot of weird things with this story because Mu Rongbo, he's been killing people. Okay, that he's killed 2 like high level people that we know of so far, but this monk is saying that he's dead. So we're not sure what's going on. So what is the real story? All right, so that's it. How's that? That's the recap. Episode 19 isn't a great place to jump in. No, you'll be very confused. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Do, 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 do. Okay, I think we ended like here or something, but let's start here. Alright, you ready? Chapter 10, Part 2. Abbot Ben Yin, or Bun Yin, said, Enlightened Lord. Oh, sorry, they're talking to this enlightened Lord that has visited them, right? Enlightened Lord, your close relationship with Mr. Murong was no doubt predestined. Now that the karmic ties which bound you have come to an end, why try to force it? Mr. Murong is now enjoying the delights of the western heaven, greeting Buddha before his lotus pool. How could he possibly still care about the martial arts learning of the mortal world? Enlightened Lord, isn't it a bit pointless for you to act in such a way? Jiumozu replied. So I think this guy is like a youngish guy, okay? A youngish Buddhist monk, but he's very respected. Abbot, your advice is very cogent, but from birth my disposition has been silly and wild. Despite secluding myself in solitary meditation for over 40 days, I nonetheless found it impossible to forget my former friendship with him. In the past, when Mr. Murong was discussing the sword techniques of the world with me, he was resolute in his opinion that the divine sword of the 6 meridians was the best in the world. The fact that he never had a chance to see it with his own eyes was his greatest regret in all his life. Abbot Bunyan said, Our monastery is secluded here in the distant south. For us to be esteemed so highly by Mr. Murong is a great honor for us. But why is it that in the past, Mr. Murong himself did not come personally to ask for a chance to see the manuscript of this skill? Jiumozi let out a long sigh. A grieved expression was on his face, and he did not speak for a long time. Finally, he said, Mr. Murong knew that this manuscript was the most precious treasure of this venerable monastery, transmitted down generation to generation. Naturally, he would not be permitted to view it. He knew that the Duan family, despite being the rulers of Dali, had never forgotten the code of righteousness and their former ties with the Jianghu. He knew that the Duan family loved the common man and was filled with benevolence. He could not bring himself to steal or forcibly take the manuscript. Bunyan thanked him, saying, Mr. Murong praised us too highly. Since Mr. Murong esteemed Dali's Duan family so highly, you yourself as his close friend, enlightened lord, should take his wishes into consideration. Jiumozi replied, But that day I made a regrettable boast. I said to him, I am the national instructor of Tibet, without any relations with Dali as well, and Tibet itself has no diplomatic relations with Dali. Mr. Murong, if it's inconvenient for you to retrieve it, allow me to do so for you. After a man has made a promise, he cannot go back on it no matter what. I made this promise to Mr. Murong, and no matter what, I cannot renege on it. And as he spoke, he lightly clapped 3 times. From outside, 2 of his men brought a wooden chest into the room, setting it down on the floor. Jiumozi simply flicked his sleeve, and the chest calmly opened by itself, exposing a brilliant, gleaming, small golden box. Jiumozi withdrew the golden box and held it within his hand. He's giving them a gift. Abbot Bunyin thought to himself, Does he think that we monastic folks might be moved by precious treasures and gifts? Besides, after administering Dali for over 150 years, how could the Duan family lack for gold or silver ornaments? He watched as Jiumozi opened the lid of the golden box and withdrew the contents. It was actually a trio of old worn books. As Jiumozi casually turned the books over, Bunyin shot them a look. The books had both pictures and words written in cinnabar ink. Jiumozi stared at the books for a long time. Suddenly, tears began to fall from his eyes, splattering on his clothes. He had a look of uncontrollable grief on his face. Bun Yin and the rest were all totally astonished. Elder Kurong said, "Enlightened Lord, you miss your old friend and are unable to sever your attachments. Aren't you ashamed to be called an eminent monk?" Hanging his head, Jiumozu said, "Master, you possess great wisdom and remarkable ability. I cannot measure up to you. These 3 books are filled with top-level martial arts techniques and were written down by Mr. Murong himself. They explain the essence and training methodology behind Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques, as well as the way by which one might defeat them." Everyone who was listening was shocked. They thought to themselves, the fame of Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques shakes the world. Supposedly, aside from an extremely wise monk who managed to learn 23 of these techniques at the beginning of the Song dynasty, no one has ever learned more than 20. For Mr. Murong to be able to understand the essence of Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques is very difficult to believe. The claim that he actually managed to figure out the weaknesses of each technique is even less believable. Jiumozu continued, "Mr. Murong gifted these 3 scrolls to me. I studied them intently and reaped the great benefits from them. My desire is that I might exchange these 3 precious scrolls for your venerable monastery's scroll of the divine sword of the 6 meridians. If all the eminent monks here would be willing to permit me to fulfill my promise, my gratitude would be boundless." What do you think, guys? Should they trade? Trade their secret technique, the family's secret techniques, for the Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques? Abbot Bunyin was silent. He thought to himself, if the skills written on these 3 scrolls really are that of the 72 ultimate techniques of Shaolin, then after acquiring them, we would not merely be on par with Shaolin in terms of martial arts knowledge, but surpass them. The Heavenly Dragon Monastery would have a thorough understanding of Shaolin's best techniques, but Shaolin would have no knowledge of ours. Yes, they should. They should trade it. Jiumozu continued, "After your respected monastery gifts me with the original scroll of the divine sword of the 6 meridians, please feel free to keep a copy of it for yourself. This means that despite allowing me to pay my respects to Mr. Murong, you yourself would not suffer any loss at all. Secondly, immediately after you give me the scroll, I will seal it. I will not sneak a single glance at it, and personally take it to the grave of Mr. Murong, where I will burn it." So he seems sincere. Thus, you have no need to worry about your elite arts being leaked out. Third, although the martial arts understanding of you, respected reverence, is deep and it requires nothing from outside, as the saying goes, a stone from another mountain can be used to polish one's own precious jade. Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques have many hidden secrets, and in particular, their flower-plucking finger, patra leaf finger, and the formless raiding finger have many similarities to your own Yi-Yang finger. Seems too good to be true? Maybe. When Abbot Ben Yun and the others had first read the golden letter which he had sent them, they believed that he intended to forcibly demand they hand over their precious treasure to him. Such would be an unreasonable, tyrannical act, but now, hearing him speak tirelessly, they began to feel as though his words were very reasonable. It seemed to them that agreeing to his request would bring great benefit to the Heavenly Dragon Temple, without them incurring any losses. It now seemed that he was actually bringing them a great gift instead. Xiang was a person who liked to get along with others. In his heart, he had already acquiesced, but because Yin was the abbot, and because Kurong was of an elder generation, it was not for him to speak. Jiumozi said, I am young, and my learning is shallow. My words alone might not be enough to win the trust of all the senior monks here. Please permit me to show some meager skill that I possess with 3-finger techniques of Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques. Oh, this guy's a salesman. He's like, let me show you a preview, all right? A free trial of what you have, of what I'm going to give to you. As he spoke, he rose to his feet. In the past, I only casually skimmed through the manual and learned the techniques to a superficial degree. My technique is very sloppy. I hope that all of you will give me some pointers. This technique is the flower plucking finger. He gently touched his right hand's thumb with his index finger, as though he had just plucked a fresh, lovely flower. A small smile was on his face as he gently flicked all 5 digits of his left hand towards the right. Aside from Duan Yu, everyone present was a martial arts expert who had specialized in and analyzed finger techniques for all their lives. They saw that the movements of Jiu Mozu's fingers were incomparably gentle. Each time he flicked out the fingers of his left hand, it was as though he were flicking away dewdrops from the flower that he was holding with his right hand. But was afraid that he might cause the flower petals to fall. The entire time, an amiable, kind, gentle expression was on his face, giving him an appearance of great wisdom. According to the legends of Zen Buddhism, Shakyamuni expounded on the Buddhist doctrine at an assembly at Mount Ling. His fingers plucked at a golden sal flower and showed them to everyone present. Everyone was silent, not understanding. Only the Arhat, Mahakashipya, showed a faint smile on his face. Shakyamuni thus knew that Maha had truly understood his mind and said, I possess the true Dharma I, the path to nirvana, the form of the formless and the subtle Dharma way, which can neither be written down nor taught. I entrust them to Mahakashipya. The most important precept in Zen Buddhism was that of achieving enlightenment via inner understanding. Shaolin belonged to the Zen school of Buddhism, and so they naturally spared no efforts in studying and refining his flower-plucking finger. Most of the 72 techniques aren't super impressive. Do you know the techniques? But there seemed to be nothing remarkable whatsoever in Jiumozu's flicking movements. After flicking for a few dozen times in succession, he lifted up the right sleeve of his robe and puffed at it. In the blink of an eye, a cascade of chess-piece-sized pieces of round cloth descended, revealing dozens of holes within his sleeves. Apparently, the dozens of finger flicks he had demonstrated earlier had all been through-the-air strikes against his own sleeves. The soft energy released had damaged the cloth, but at first it had seemed totally unharmed. Only after he gently breathed on it was the effect revealed. Okay. So you guys understand what was happening? It was like flicking at his robe, right? And they were like, oh, nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Then he started flicking his robe, and then all these little round pieces started falling down. So he was actually striking his own sleeves and poking holes in it. Bun Yin, Bun Guan, Bun Xiang, Bun Kan, Bun Tan, and Emperor Baoding all glanced at each other a few times. All of them were secretly astonished. Based on our level of skill, using the Yi-Yang finger to strike through the air and puncture holes in clothing is not difficult at all. But to execute such a divine technique with such gentle, soft movements, while holding such a placid, smiling expression on our faces, is impossible for us. The flower-plucking finger is totally different from our Yi-Yang finger. It emphasizes the use of soft yin energy. There is definitely a great deal we could learn from it, as it is like unto a mirror of our own skills. Jiumozu said with a small smile, I've embarrassed myself My skill in the flower-plucking finger is far inferior to that of Master Xuandu of Shaolin. My skill in the patra leaf finger is even more laughable. He immediately turned his body around and began to circle around the wooden box on the floor. He struck out in repeated succession with all 10 of his digits. The onlookers watched as scraps of wood on the chest began to fly off the chest and dance around. In the blink of an eye, the wooden chest had been reduced to a pile of wooden scraps. Emperor Baoding and the others thought that there was nothing special about him destroying a wooden chest with his fingers, but the chest's hinges, copper strips, iron locks, padlocks, and other metal components also completely disintegrated under the pressure of the force of Jiumozu's fingers. This caused them to be involuntarily shocked yet again. Smiling, Jiumozu said, "In exercising this patra leaf finger technique, I had a tyrannical air. My cultivation is shallow indeed." As he spoke, he folded his hands within the folds of his clothes. Suddenly, that pile of wood and metal scraps began to jump about and dance. It was as though some person wielding a thin, invisible stick was beating them and stirring them up. When they looked at Jiumozu, they saw that a calm, smiling expression remained on his face. None of his clothes, from his sleeves to lower hem of his gown. Wait. What? Typo? None of his clothes, from his sleeves to his gown, were moving or fluttering in the slightest. Evidently, he was secretly projecting his finger energy from within his clothes, and yet didn't reveal a trace of it at all. Bunxiang couldn't control himself and praised, "The formless raiding finger lives up to its name. Admirable! Admirable indeed." Jiumozu bowed and said, "Master, you praise me too highly. The jumping of the wooden chips is still visible. For the technique to truly match up to its name, it must be both formless and invisible. Even if one spent all of his life assiduously practicing this technique, he might not be able to achieve such a level." Master Bunxiang said, "Among the scrolls left behind by Mr. Mu Rong, did he include a method by which one can defeat this formless raiding finger?" Jiumozu replied, "He did. The method by which one can defeat this technique arises from your own honorable religious name." Bunxiang mumbled to himself for some time, then said, "Right. One must use the true form to overcome the formless. Brilliant! This is extremely brilliant." Bunyin said, "Martial uncle, the enlightened lord has come to us from afar, and his request appears to be genuine and sincere. How should we handle this situation? We respectfully await your instructions." Elder Kurong said, "Bunyin, what is the purpose of our study of martial arts?" Abbot Bunyin never would have imagined that Elder Kurong would have replied to him with such a question. After being stunned for a brief moment, he replied, "To improve our dharma and to protect our nation." Elder Kurong asked, "When an evil opponent appears, whom we are unable to dissuade using Buddhism, due to our shallow understanding of dharma, and forces us to use force to subdue him, what type of martial arts should we use?" Bunyin replied, "If we have no choice but to use force, we would naturally use the Yi-Yang finger." Elder Kurong asked, "What level of proficiency have you attained in your mastery of the Yi-Yang finger?" Sweat began to appear on Abbot Bunyin's forehead. "Your disciple is slow and stupid by nature, and due to my position I am unable to settle down to properly advance. I have only reached the 4th level." Define assiduously? Ah, crap. Where is that? If one spent all of his life assiduously practicing. I guess that would mean practicing in a hard working way, like you, I don't know, you practice really hard. It seems That seems like the only definition that could be. Um, that seems like the only definition that could be true. So it means working hard, guys. Working hard, practicing this technique. Assiduous. Showing great care and perseverance. I think that counts. I think that counts. Where are we? Elder Kurong continued. So he's chastising the abbot. In your opinion, how does our Yi Yang finger compare with Shaolin's flower plucking finger, Patra leaf finger, and formless raiding finger? Which is stronger and which is weaker? Benyin replied, there is no such thing as strength or weakness in techniques, only in each individual's learning and power. Elder Kurong replied, precisely so. And what if our Yi Yang finger is practiced to the highest level? The depth of the skill is so profound that I dare not wildly speculate. If you managed to live on for another 100 years, what level could you attain? The sweat on Bunyin's forehead dripped down in a steady stream. In a trembling voice, he said, your disciple does not know. Elder Kurong asked, can you master the highest level? I definitely cannot. Elder Kurong fell silent at this point and spoke no more. Bunyin said, martial uncle, your words are wise. We are not yet even able to fully master the highest levels of our own martial arts skills. What uses have we for books containing the skills and techniques of others? Enlightened Lord, you have made an arduous journey to come here. Let us welcome you properly with a vegetarian meal. In speaking these words, he was tacitly refusing the request of the enlightened Lord of the Great Wheel. Okay, so they're refusing the trade, right? They don't want to trade. Jiumozu let out a long sigh. Let's see what he does. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have opened my mouth and made such a foolish promise. Otherwise, with Mr. Murong dead, what does it matter whether or not I am able to obtain the scroll of the divine sword of the 6 meridians? Today, this young monk is going to be wildly bold and say a few audacious words that may display an exaggerated opinion of my own abilities. If the technique of the divine sword of the 6 meridians really is as amazing and profound as Mr. Murong believed, I fear that even if your venerable monastery has the scroll, it does not have anyone capable of learning it. If someone here is capable of learning it, then in all likelihood it is not nearly as amazing as Mr. Murong believed it to be. That's like a very polite insult. Elder Kurong said, this old monk is confused about something. I hope that the enlightened Lord can instruct me. Jiumotsu said, I wouldn't dare. Elder Kurong said, the fact that the divine scroll of the 6 meridians is hidden within our humble temple is concealed even from the secular members of the Duan family. Might I ask, how is it that Mr. Murong learned of this? Jiumotsu replied, Mr. Murong's understanding of the martial arts of the world was extremely deep and broad. He even had at his fingertips many skills belonging to various sects which had long been forgotten by even the leaders of the sects themselves. The characters used to describe Mr. Murong, using the opponent's skill, exercising them upon the opponent, comes from this. But all his life, Mr. Murong was never able to learn any of the secrets of the Yi Yang finger, or the divine sword of the 6 meridians. This troubled him all his life, and he took this regret with him to his grave. Audacious definition. It means like arrogant, something bold. Audacious. Yeah, bold, daring. Elder Kurong grunted, then fell silent. Emperor Baoding and the others thought to themselves, if he really learns the secrets of the Yi Yang Finger and the divine sword of the 6 meridians, then I fear that he might really be able to use our own techniques against us in the future. Abbot Bunyin said, it has been well over a decade since my martial uncle has received any guests. Enlightened Lord, as you are an eminent monk of this era, my martial uncle made an exception and has accompanied you for a long time. Enlightened Lord, please. As he spoke, he rose to his feet, signifying the meeting was at an end. But Jiumozi did not rise with him. He unhurriedly said, the scroll of the divine sword of the 6 meridians is only a tool with an undeserved reputation and has no practical use. Why must your precious temple hold it in such importance, to the point where you would be willing to harm the friendship between the Heavenly Dragon Temple and the Great Wheel Temple, as well as the diplomatic relations of Dali and Tibet? Bunyan's face changed slightly. He said in an awe-inspiring way, Enlightened Lord, are you saying that if the Heavenly Dragon Temple does not hand the manuscript over, that Dali and Tibet will face each other with weapons and armies? Emperor Baoding had always kept a strong garrison of forces to the northwestern boundaries of the country, so as to keep Tibet from invading. Upon hearing Jiamozi's words, he became totally engrossed in the conversation. Oh, was that a threat? Jiamozi replied, the master of my country has long yearned for Dali's local environment and people. He has long desired to meet with your honored country's master and compete with him. However, I felt that doing so would cause great loss of innocent life, which is greatly in contradiction with the heart of Buddha's teachings. For many years I have spared no effort in dissuading him from such a course. Bunyin and the others were all aware that a veiled threat was hidden within Jiamozi's words. He was the national protector and Dharma king of Tibet. Everyone in Tibet, from the king to the commoners, was Buddhist, much like the country of Dali. Jiamozi always had the trust of the Tibetan king. Whether there would be peace or war with the nation could hinge on a single word from him. It really would not be worth it for the people of their 2 countries to be forced to endure suffering over a simple manuscript. Tibet was powerful, whereas Dali was weak. If war really did break out, the overall situation would be very dangerous. But how could the Heavenly Dragon Temple freely give up their most precious treasure to him by virtue of him trying to intimidate them? So this Jiumozi guy is really serious. All right, he's willing to have war over this manuscript. Elder Kurong said, since you, enlightened lord, desire this manuscript so much, far be it for this old monk to deny you, but we dare not agree to exchange it for Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques. Enlightened lord, as you have mastered all of Shaolin's techniques, in addition to the martial arts of the great Snowy Mountains Great Wheel Monastery, you are no doubt peerless and without equal in the world. Jiamozi clapped his hands together. Master, do you mean for me to put my incompetence on display? Elder Kurong said, enlightened lord, you said that our monastery's manuscript of the divine sword of the 6 meridians is a useless tool, undeserving of its fame, which cannot be used. We will use the divine sword of the 6 meridians to experience your elite skills. If it really is as you said, enlightened lord, and the technique is unusable and undeserving of its fame, why should we value it? In such a case, enlightened lord, feel free to take it. Alright, we're gonna battle. Is this Wuxia novel? Sorry. Is this a Wuxia novel? Yes. It's called Demi-Gods and Semi-Devils. It's a very famous one. Alright, they're gonna fight. Jiumozu was secretly startled. In the past, when he discussed the divine sword of the 6 meridians with Mr. Murong, he learned enough to know that it totally depended on converting internal energy into invisible sword chi. They both felt that no matter how astonishing the techniques were, for a single person to have enough internal energy to use all 6 of his meridians to create sword chi was most likely impossible. Now, judging from Elder Kurong's words, not only was he capable of using the technique, but all of the other monks around him were as well. The Heavenly Dragon Temple's centuries-long fame clearly was no little thing indeed. His expression had been very polite and respectful all along. Now he became even more polite. Bowing forward slightly, he said, "It is this humble monk's greatest fortune for you, honored reverends, to be willing to display such a consummate skill in front of me." Abbot Bunyan said, "Enlightened Lord, what weapons do you wish to use? Please feel free to take them out now." Jiumozu clapped his hands together. From outside entered a very tall and large man. Jiumozu spoke a few words of Tibetan to him, and the man nodded while responding. He withdrew a stick of fragrant Tibetan incense from an outside box, handing it to Jiumozu before retreating from the room. Everyone present was baffled. The stick of incense would snap at a blow. How could it be possibly used as a weapon? Okay. So Jiumozu, this monk's weapon, is a stick of incense. Only to see Jiumozu hold the stick of incense with his left hand while reaching down to pick up some of the wooden scraps with his right. He gently fixed the stick of incense within the pile of scraps. He repeated this 5 more times until he had created a row of 6 sticks of incense. Oh wait, so that's not his weapon? There was roughly 1 foot of distance between each stick. Jiumozu knelt down 5 feet behind the line of incense. Suddenly, he rubbed his palms together a few times, then thrust them outwards. All 6 pieces of incense suddenly lit with fire in unison. Everyone present was shocked, thinking to themselves that this person's internal energy strength had reached an inconceivably high level. But then they smelled a scent of sulfur from the incense, and guessed that the incense had been tipped with gunpowder. Oh. It's gunpowder incense. Okay, so he has 6 sticks of incense in a line, I guess. And he's sitting behind it. And he's doing his chi stuff behind it. Oh, you just looked it up? The flower plucking fingers is one of the 72 Shaolin arts? Wow. That's cool. Jiumozu hadn't actually set them alight with his internal energy. Rather, he has used his energy to generate friction-based heat to agitate the gunpowder. Although this was still no easy task, it was something which Emperor Baoding and the others could do as well if they exerted their internal strength. The smoke from the Tibetan incense was dark green in color. 6 lines of the dark green smoke lazily curled upwards towards the ceiling. Jiumozu cupped his hands together as though he were holding a sphere. He generated his internal energy, and the 6 lines of smoke slowly began to curve outwards. Each line headed towards one of the 6 monks. 1 to Kurong, 1 to Bunguan, 1 to Bunyin, 1 to Bunxiang, 1 to Buncan, and 1 to Emperor Baoding. He's fighting with smoke. This type of palm energy, which he was releasing, was called the Blazing Flame Saber. Although it had no form and no substance, it was invisible, it could still take a person's life. It was an incomparably powerful technique indeed. At this moment in time, he only wanted to gain the manuscript, not to take someone's life. Thus, he lit these 6 sticks of incense as to reveal the direction and heading of his palm energy. In this way, not only could he display his power and confidence, he could also demonstrate his merciful and benevolent heart. They would only be competing in terms of comparing their relative martial arts proficiencies, rather than trying to kill or injure each other. Okay. So he's not fighting with the incense. It's just to show that he has invisible chi energy, right? He can shoot his chi out. And the smoke is showing where his chi is going. Once the 6 lines of smoke arrived within a meter of Bunyin and the others, they came to a halt and became unmoving. Bunyin and the others were astonished yet again. It was not too difficult for a person to cause smoke to move using his energy, but to cause the drifting, aimless smoke to suddenly come to a halt and freeze in the middle of the air was 10 times more difficult. Bunsan extended the pinky of his left hand, and a stream of energy erupted from his Xiaochong acupoint, rushing towards the line of jade smoke in front of him. As soon as that line of smoke came into contact with this stream of energy, it rushed back towards Jiumozi with incomparable speed. When it reached within 2 feet of Jiumozi's body, he increased the energy of his blazing flame saber, and it could advance no further. Jiumozi nodded. Impressive, and worthy of the praise which is heaped on it. The divine sword of the 6 meridians really does have a technique known as the Shaozi sword. The internal energy of the two clashed repeatedly for many moves. Master Bunsan Master Bunsan knew that if he remained seated without moving, it would be very difficult to give free rein to the full power of the technique. He immediately rose to his feet and took 3 diagonal steps towards the left, with the internal energy from his pinky now attacking diagonally as well. Jiumozi thrust out his own left hand and immediately blocked the attack. Bun Guan's middle finger suddenly straightened, fighting with the middle finger now, and the power of his Zhongchong sword rushed forward. Jiumozi exclaimed, "Excellent! This is the Zhongchong sword technique." With a wave of his palm, he blocked the attack. Despite fighting against the 2 of them simultaneously, he did not seem the slightest bit nervous. Seated in front of Elder Kurong, Duan Yu continually snuck side glances towards this battle, the likes of which Wulin might see only once every 1,000 years. Although he did not understand martial arts, he could still tell that these eminent monks were using their internal energy to compete in a sword competition with each other. The situation was even more dangerous than if they were wielding actual physical swords against each other. Fortunately for him, Jiumozi had prepared those 6 sticks of incense, and so he was able to see some of their sword and saber techniques of the 3 via the movement of the smoke. You have to sleep? Alright, good night, Toho. After watching for over 10 stances, he suddenly realized, I know, that Master Bun Guan's Zhongchong sword technique. It is totally identical to the technique which was drawn on his manuscript. He gently unscrolled the manuscript teaching to the Zhongchong sword technique, comparing the movements of the smoke to the sword techniques contained in the manuscript. With it serving as a reference, he now understood everything he saw, including Bunsan's Shaozi sword techniques. The techniques of the Zhongchong sword were majestic and imposing, with large and grand motions. In contrast, the Shaozi sword flickered here and there, its changes and movements small and refined. So it looks like Duan Yu is really learning these techniques. Abbot Bunyin saw that his 2 martial brothers could not gain the slightest advantage, despite having joined forces. He thought to himself, we have not yet thoroughly finished our studies of this technique, and can easily run out of attacking strokes. The earlier all 6 of us join in, the better. The enlightened lord of the great will is intelligent to the extreme. Right now, it seems as though he is simply observing Bunsan and Bun Guan's techniques. He isn't using all of his abilities. He immediately said, Brothers Bunxiang and Bunshan, let us join in as well. He stretched out his index finger, attacking with the Shanyang sword technique. Following him was Bun Xiang's Shaochong sword technique and Emperor Baoding's Guanchong sword technique. In unison, the three streams of sword qi attacked the three lines of jade smoke in front of them. Duan Yu's eyes wandered left and right. He would check out the Shaochong sword technique, and the Guanchong sword technique, and the Shanyang sword technique. After he compared them to the illustrated manual, he could understand what was going on in general, but by and large, everything seemed confused and jumbled to him. Just as he was rapidly studying the instructions for the Shaochong sword technique, he saw Elder Kurong stretch his finger onto the drawings and write, "Only study one at a time. Move on to the next one only after you are done with the previous." Duan Yu's heart jumped. He realized that Elder Kurong was giving him pointers. Turning around, he smiled slightly towards Elder Kurong so as to express his appreciation. Oh, that's nice of him. Remember, you have to be a monk to learn these techniques, but looks like Elder Kurong is carving out an exception for Duan Yu. But as soon as he turned around, the smile on his face immediately froze and became stiff. The face he saw was extremely bizarre. The left side of Elder Kurong's face was healthy and rosy. The skin was smooth and the flesh was abundant, like the face of a young baby. But the right side of his face was like a withered bone. Aside from a layer of sallow skin, there wasn't so much as a single scrap of flesh. With the bones on prominent display, it seemed very much like half of a skeleton's skull. What the heck? In his startlement, he immediately turned back, his heart pounding madly in his chest. He knew that this was the result of Elder Kurong practicing the withered glory meditation art, but this half-withered, half-healthy face was simply too terrifying. Oh, this face. He has a two-faced face. For the moment, he felt as though he couldn't calm down no matter what, only to see Elder Kurong's index finger once more tracing the words on the scroll. "Do not waste such a good opportunity. Focus all your attention on studying the sword techniques. Watch by yourself and learn by yourself. That does not count as violating our ancestral commandments." Duan Yu realized, Grand Marshal Uncle Kurong said to my uncle that the divine sword of the 6 meridians cannot be taught to secular disciples. Only after he shaved his head and became a monk could he be taught the technique. But for him to now write, "Watch by yourself and learn by yourself," that does not count as violating our ancestral commandments, implies that the commandments of the ancestors of the Duan family do not specifically forbid secular members of the family from studying the techniques independently. He ordered me to not waste such a good opportunity and to focus all my attention on studying the techniques. Naturally, he wants me to study and learn by myself right now. He immediately nodded, then began to carefully study his uncle's execution of the Guanchong sword technique. After more or less understanding it, he moved on to the Shaochong sword technique and the Shanyang sword technique. Define commandment. A commandment is like a rule, like a really important rule. Yeah. Like the 10 Commandments from the Bible. A divine rule. There you go. There's always a loophole. Yep. Truth. For ordinary people, the ring finger is the least dexterous, whereas the index finger is the most nimble. Oh, is that true? Maybe. It's a stretch between my middle and ring finger. They seem both the same amount of dexterity. Thus, the Guanchong sword technique strove to achieve victory in a sluggish, simple, and unsophisticated way, whereas the techniques of the Shanyang sword were ingenious, lively, and difficult to ascertain. The Shaochong sword was similar to the Shaozi sword technique in that it used the pinky. However, one was on the left hand, whereas one was on the right hand. Thus, in terms of technique, the divine sword of the 6 meridians had techniques that were skilled as well as clumsy, nimble as well as sluggish, and yet the clumsy techniques were not any less powerful. not any less wonderful, nor the sluggish techniques contain any less might. They were just displayed in different ways. At first, Duan Yu had just been curious. He was simply comparing the movements of the jade smoke to the techniques written down on the scrolls. It was something akin to guessing riddles. Only now, after receiving directions from Elder Ku Rong, did he settle down and seriously watch the battle. By the time he more or less understood the techniques of the Shanyang sword, Shaocheng sword, and Guancheng sword, Bun Guan and Bun Tan were beginning to repeat their respective sets of movements and attacks. Duan Yu no longer needed to refer to the manuscript each time. The movements of the jade smoke were identical to the sword techniques which he had memorized. He felt as though the lines and techniques drawn on the paper were rigid and inflexible, whereas the movement of the jade smoke underwent boundless changes and transformations. The techniques were much richer and more diverse by far than the ones actually written on the scroll. You're procrastinating homework to watch? Hey, do your homework. What are you doing? What are you doing? Well, this is episode 19, so you probably have to go back to episode 1 anyways. I don't know if watching this episode will do you any good. You just get confused. After watching for a while longer, he saw that Bun Yin, Bun Xian, and Emperor Baoding's techniques had been exhausted as well. Bun Xian flicked out his pinky, striking with the parting flowers, flicking willows technique. It was the second time he had used this technique. Jiu Mozi nodded slightly. Following this, Bun Yin and Emperor Baoding could not help but repeat previously used techniques as well. Suddenly, a chi-chi sound could be heard from in front of Jiu Mozi, and the power of his blazing flame saber increased dramatically, forcing back the internal energy of the five. As it were, Jiu Mozi initially remained on the defensive, desiring to see the techniques of the divine sword in its entirety before counterattacking. Now that he had changed from defense to offense, the 5 lines of smoke whirled about in the air with incomparable nimbleness. But that 6th line of smoke remained calmly unmoving in front of Elder Ku Rong, still 3 feet away from him and not moving in the slightest. Elder Ku Rong desired to know the exact extent of his abilities and see how long he could hold out, fighting with 5 lines of smoke, but holding the 6th stock still. This was why that entire time he hadn't extended his own hand to attack. And sure enough, Jiu Mozi really did expend a rather considerable amount of energy, keeping that 6th stream of smoke still. But now that line of jade smoke finally began to inch its way towards the back of Elder Ku Rong's skull. Alarmed, Duan Yu said, "Grand Marshal Uncle, the jade smoke is attacking." Elder Ku Rong nodded, then unrolled the Shaoshang sword manuscript and placed it in front of Duan Yu. Duan Yu saw that the illustrations of the Shaoshang sword manuscript were made in the splash ink style, similar to the style used for scenic paintings. The horizontal and vertical lines were tilted and few in number, but the sword technique was strong and vigorous, with the capability of shattering the earth and battering the heavens, containing within it the power of the wind and the rain. Duan Yu studied the sword manuscript, but could not forget about the stream of jade smoke that was floating towards the back of Elder Ku Rong's skull. Turning around, he saw that the jade smoke was now only 3 or 4 inches away. He cried out in alarm, "Careful!" Elder Ku Rong flipped his hands over, then extended the thumbs of both hands. Oh. With 2 chi-chi sounds, they launched separate surprise attacks on Jiu Mozi's right shoulder and the right side of his chest. He did not ward off his enemy's assault. Rather, he sent 2 brilliant attacks of his own to counterattack his opponent. His judgment was that Jiu Mozi's blazing flame saber internal energy was still not fully released. As it was advancing towards him only slowly, for it to actually harm him would still take it a short while. If, despite moving after Jiu Mozi did, his attack arrived first, he would be able to catch Jiu Mozi off guard. Jiu Mozi was a careful and contemplative person. Long ago, he had prepared a stream of palm energy which protected his chest. but he had only anticipated a single ferocious attack from the Shaoxiang sword, and did not foresee Elder Kurong would launch twin surprise attacks at the same time, and threaten two different areas. Jiumozi raised his palm and used it to block the attack on the right side of his chest. Following that, he kicked upwards with his right foot, hurriedly propelling himself backwards. But no matter how quickly he retreated, he could not move faster than the sword chi, which arrived with the speed of the thunder and lightning. With a soft sound, the top of the robe on his shoulder split open, and fresh blood spilled forward. All right, first blood. Elder Kurong reversed his thumbs, retracting his internal energy and pulling back towards him. All 6 sticks of incense snapped simultaneously. Bunyin, Emperor Baoding, and the rest also withdrew their fingers and dissipated their sword energy. Each of them had fought for a long time without achieving success and had been secretly anxious for a long time now. Only now did they feel relieved. Jiumozi walked back inside the room, a small smile on his lips. He said, Elder Kurong, your meditation arts are extraordinary indeed. This humble monk admires you greatly. But as for that divine sword of the 6 meridians, well, it seems it really is nothing more than a tool with an undeserved reputation. Abbot Bunyin said, How is it nothing more than a useless tool? I must ask that you enlighten us. Jiumozi said, What the venerable Mr. Murong admired was the sword techniques of the divine sword of the 6 meridians, not the sword formation. This sword formation of the heavenly dragon temple really is very powerful, but if we were to compare it to Shaolin's Arhat sword formation, or Kunlun's Sex's chaos sword formation, it can only be said to be on the same level, and cannot be said to be the most unparalleled sword technique in the world. By describing it as a sword formation instead of a sword technique, he was pointing out the fact that all 6 of them fought in unison with a pre-planned formation, rather than one of them using the divine sword of the 6 meridians by himself, as he, Jiumozi, had done with his blazing flame saber. Abbot Bunyin felt that his words were indeed reasonable, and was at a loss for a response, but Bun San only coldly sneered. Regardless of whether it was a sword technique or a sword formation, were you, enlightened lord, the victor in that competition, or was the heavenly dragon temple the victor in that competition? Jiumozi did not reply. Closing his eyes, he silently meditated for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. Opening his eyes, he said, In the first round, your respected monastery took the upper hand, but in the second round, I believe I am guaranteed victory. Bunyin was startled. He asked, Enlightened lord, you want to compete in another round? Jiumozi replied, A man must live up to his words. Since I have already given my word to Mr. Murong, how can I back off at the first sight of difficulty? Bunyin asked, And why is it that you are guaranteed a victory, enlightened lord? Jiumozi smiled slightly. Everyone here has a profound and deep understanding of martial arts. Can it be that you cannot guess? Please prepare to receive my stances. As he spoke, his 2 palms slowly pushed outwards. Elder Kurong, Bunyin, Emperor Baoding, and the other 3 simultaneously felt as though 2 streams of internal energy were suddenly attacking from different directions. Bunyin and the others all felt that they could not use the divine sword of the 6 meridians to block this energy attack. Each of them faced 2 streams of energy and pushed out with palms to block the attack. Only Elder Kurong continued to thrust out the thumbs of both of his hands, using the Shaoyang sword technique to receive the opponent's energy. After pushing out his twin burst of palm energy, Jiumozi immediately halted his attack. Excuse me for offending you. Bunyin, Bunguan, and the others all traded glances. All of them understood. With a single palm, he was able to send out so many streams of internal energy. If Elder Kurong were to launch another concerted double attack on him, he would be able to withstand it. But we, on the other hand, would have to give up the sword techniques and use palm techniques. It seems our divine sword of the 6 meridians is inferior to his blazing flame saber. Alright. 5-minute break. While I rest my mouth. Alright. We'll be right back. 5 minutes. And we're back. Alright. So this monk is like talking shit about their divine sword technique, okay? Talking shit about their secret Duan family technique. So let's see what happens. Alright, this monk is not impressed. But just at this very moment, smoke could be seen rising up from in front of Elder Kurong. 4 distinct lines of black smoke drifted upwards and moved towards Jumozu. Jumozu held a deep, secret dread of this old monk who sat facing the wall and never turned around a single time. Now seeing the smoke head towards him and not knowing what the old monk's intention was, Jumozu once again executed his blazing flame saber technique to ward off all 4 lines of smoke. He did not immediately launch a counterattack, both so that he could not be caught off guard by a simultaneous attack from Bun Yin and the others, as well as to enable himself to calmly see if Elder Kurong had any other fearsome technique. The black smoke grew thicker and thicker, showing that the attack was extremely aggressive. Jiumozu was secretly surprised. To launch an all-out attack like this is like saying that a windstorm cannot last all morning, and a rainstorm cannot last all evening. How can this possibly be sustained? Emperor Kurong is an eminent monk of this age. How could he use such a rash, aggressive method to fight his opponent? He felt that Elder Kurong couldn't possibly be that inexperienced. Thus, he must have some other trick up his sleeve. He immediately tightened his defenses and raised his guard mentally, preparing himself to immediately act in accordance to the situation. After a long period of time, the 4 lines of smoke suddenly began to split. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8, 8 became 16, rushing towards Jiumozu from all directions. Jiumozu thought to himself, an arrow at the end of its flight is a spent force, nothing worth even talking about. He executed his blazing flame saber technique and blocked every single line. As soon as his internal energy touched the lines of smoke, they split and fell apart, filling the entire room with smoke in the blink of an eye. Jiumozu was not worried in the slightest, generating his internal energy to protect his entire body. As the smoke and the mist thinned by degrees, he could hazily see that Bun Yin and the other 5 monks were on their knees, a solemn expression on their faces. A look of great grief and indignation could be seen on the faces of Bun Tan and Bun Guan in particular. In a moment of clarity, Jiumozu suddenly realized the truth. He secretly cried out, "Oh no! This old monk Kurong knows that they aren't a match for me, so he actually burned the manuscript of the divine sword of the 6 meridians." His guess was correct. Elder Kurong had used the force of his Yi-Yang finger to set the 6 manuscripts ablaze. Afraid that Jiumozu would prevent him from doing so and snatch the manuscripts by force, he used his internal energy to push the smoke towards Jiumozu, forcing Jiumozu to stay on the defense and exert his efforts towards protecting himself. By the time the smoke dissipated, the drawings had long since been reduced to ashes. Oh, he burned the secret manuscript. You know what? Respect. Okay. That's what you got to do. You got to sacrifice some things. Okay, so he burned the manuscript so that this guy won't get it. Bun Yin and the others were experts of the Yi-Yang finger, who had spent many years mastering it. As soon as they saw the black smoke, they knew what caused it. They thought to themselves that their martial uncle would rather die with glory than live with dishonor, and was willing to destroy this most precious treasure of their monastery rather than let it fall into enemy hands. Fortunately, the 6 of them had each memorized a portion of the technique. Once their powerful enemy departed, they would simply recreate it from memory. Only a priceless artifact, which had been handed down to them by their ancestors, had been totally destroyed. Now the heavenly dragon temple and the enlightened lord of the great wheel had formed between them a long, deep, and bitter enmity. It would be difficult for there to be any sort of peace between them. Jiumotsu was both startled and angry. He usually had a very high opinion of his own intelligence and stratagems, but today he had been defeated by Elder Kurong twice in a row, and witnessed the destruction of the manual of the divine sword of the six meridians, earning himself a bitter enemy without any reward at all. What's up, Lady Koi? Thanks for joining. He stood up and folded his palms together. Elder Kurong, why did you need to be rigid and inflexible to such an extent that you would rather shatter the manuscript than allow it to fall in the hands of others? Shows your lofty style and temperament that your venerable monastery's most precious treasure was destroyed in part due to the actions of this humble monk is a source of great regret for me. Fortunately, it was impossible for any one person to fully learn the martial arts on this manuscript. Thus, it does not really matter whether or not it was destroyed. I will take my leave now. He turned around slightly. Not waiting for Elder Kurong or Abbot Bunyin to reply, he suddenly struck out and seized Emperor Baoding's wrist, grabbing his wrist acupoints and saying, My humble country's ruler has long wished to meet with Emperor Baoding. Your Majesty, I'll have to invite you to make a journey to Tibet with me. Everyone was greatly startled by this totally unexpected turn of events. This sneak attack was executed so unexpectedly that despite Emperor Baoding's own formidable level of martial arts, Emperor Baoding fell to it. Jiumotsu had seized the Li Chi and Pian Li acupoints on his wrist. Emperor Baoding hurriedly exerted his internal energy to protect himself. In the blink of an eye, he had made 7 attempts to break loose, but was unable to each time. Abbot Bunyin and everyone else present felt that this ambush was too despicable and contemptible, totally not in keeping with his station as an elite martial artist. However, they managed to control their anger, and yet remained unable to think of a plan for rescue. With Emperor Baoding's acupoints under the control of the opponent, his life could be taken at any point in time. Bells for the manuscript? Alright. Oh, it's like a bell at a temple, too. Elder Kurong laughed. He once was Emperor Baoding, but has since abdicated and become a monk. His religious name is Bun Chun. Bun Chun, since the ruler of Tibet wishes to meet you, you might as well go. Oh yeah, true. He's no longer emperor. Helpless, Emperor Baoding could only say yes. He knew what Elder Kurong was trying to do. Jiumotsu considered him the ruler of a country, and thus a priceless hostage. But with Elder Kurong describing him as having already abdicated his throne, he was no longer a priceless royal hostage, but only a monk of the Heavenly Dragon Monastery, making him a useless personage of little importance. Perhaps, in that case, Jiumotsu would release him. Ever since Jiumotsu had entered the Muni Pavilion, Emperor Baoding had not said a single word or revealed a single hint of his real origins. But in order to execute even a single sword of the divine sword of the six meridians, one must be a first-class martial arts master, with an extraordinarily deep and profound internal energy cultivation. The people within the Wulin who could be considered first-class masters were well aware of who the others were. Jiumotsu had not come to Dali unprepared. Before arriving, he had carefully made inquiries regarding the appearances and ages of each and every single member of Dali's Duan family, as well as the disciples of the Heavenly Dragon Monastery. He had an 80 or 90% understanding of each person's temperaments, habits, and achievements in martial arts. He knew that aside from Elder Kurong, the Heavenly Dragon Monastery had 4 more martial arts masters. Now a Bun Chun had appeared out of nowhere, a person he had never heard of before, and with an extremely powerful internal energy, that was not one whit inferior to the 4 other Bun generation monks. Seeing his majestic poise and judging from his features that he came from a luxurious background, Jiumotsu guessed that he was Emperor Baoding. Hearing Elder Kurong say that Emperor Baoding had already abdicated the throne and become a monk, Jiumotsu's heart was swayed. I have long heard that in each succeeding dynasty, the Dons of Dali would often abdicate and join the monastery. It is not altogether unbelievable that Emperor Baoding might do the same and join the Heavenly Dragon Monastery. But if an emperor were to abdicate and become a monk, there would be grand ceremonies held throughout the country, with gifts of food being given to monks and rituals made before the Buddha. Pagodas would be renovated and new temples would be built. It would be a huge public affair, not something kept so low-key and under wraps. Even my Tibet, upon hearing the news, send an envoy to congratulate the new monarch. There's some trickery involved here. He replied, regardless of whether or not Emperor Baoding has abdicated, he still needs to make a trip with me and pay a visit to my humble country's ruler. As he spoke, he tugged on the Emperor Baoding's hand, intending to immediately exit. Oh, he's going to kidnap the Emperor now? Bunyin loudly shouted, wait a moment! His form flickered, and he, along with Buntan and the other monks, simultaneously moved in front of the door. Jiumotsu said, I have no intentions of harming Emperor Baoding, but if all of you force me to, then there's no other options I can take. This guy talks politely, but he has venom in his words. His right hand fainted towards the back of Emperor Baoding's heart. The power of his blazing flame saber was all-conquering and unstoppable. With Emperor Baoding's meridians already under Jiumotsu's control, Emperor Baoding was helpless to resist and had no way to defend himself. If all of the monks of the Heavenly Dragon Monastery were to attack at once, not only would they fear breaking the dishes in order to pelt the rat, they still could not be certain of victory. And yet Abbot Bunyin and the others were still hesitant. Emperor Baoding was the ruler of Dali. How could they allow an enemy to kidnap him and march him away under duress? Nanner sandwich? Thanks, Nanner. I appreciate it. Jiumotsu loudly shouted, I've long heard the fame of the eminent monks of the Heavenly Dragon Monastery. I never would have imagined that they would be so irresolute over such a small matter, like little boys or girls. Please, make way for me. After seeing his uncle being captured, Duan Yu was extremely anxious. At first, he thought to himself that with his uncle's level of martial arts, there was no need to fear. He thought that his uncle was just being patient for now, and when the right moment came, he would free himself. But the more he watched, the more Duan Yu felt that something wasn't right. There was a look of great arrogance on Jiumotsu's face, and his words were proud and overbearing, whereas Bunyin, Bunguan, and the others looked anxious, angry, and helpless. As he watched Jiumotsu head towards the exit with Emperor Baoding in tow, Duan Yu was filled with fear and worry. Without pausing to think, he shouted, Hey, you! Let go of my uncle! Oh, shit. Following this, he came out from behind Elder Kurong. Jiumotsu had long ago seen a young man hiding behind Elder Kurong, but was unable to guess who that person might be, much less the reason why he was sitting in front of Elder Kurong. Now, seeing him come out, his curiosity compelled him to turn his head and ask, Might I ask who you are, sir? Duan Yu replied, Don't ask me who I am. Let go of my uncle first. Stretching out his right hand, he seized Emperor Baoding's left hand. Emperor Baoding said, Don't mind me. Leave quickly and go to your father, and tell him to immediately ascend the throne and take on this heavy responsibility. I am an old monk who is like a lazy cloud or an untamed crane. What is there to be concerned about? Duan Yu exerted all his strength to pull at Emperor Baoding's wrist while shouting, Quickly, let go of my uncle! The Shaoshang acupoint of his thumb was touching the acupoints on Emperor Baoding's wrist. With him now exerting his strength, Emperor Baoding's entire body trembled. Oh no, he's absorbing his uncle's energy, and he immediately felt his internal energy flowing outwards. At this exact same point in time, Jiumotsu also felt his energy being drawn away from him. His countenance immediately changed. He thought to himself, how is it that the Duan dynasty of Dali learned the great art of energy dissipation? He immediately gathered his internal energy to fight against this evil, heterodox martial arts. Emperor Baoding immediately felt as though two fierce and powerful streams of energy were jerking at his body. He immediately used the technique of borrowing a saber to strike at a knife, forcing these two streams of energy to directly face each other. At this moment in time, these two streams of energy were principally facing off against each other with very little focus on his wrists. With a wave of his hand, he broke free from Jiumotsu's grip. Together with Duan Yu, he floated backwards and retreated. He cried out to himself, how shameful that I was able to escape. This is all thanks to you. Jiumotsu was more than a little bit startled by this turn of events. He thought to himself, another powerful martial artist suddenly appeared in the central plains. How could I have been totally unaware of this? This person is very young and is only around 20 years of age. How could he have reached such a level of martial arts? He addressed Emperor Baoding as uncle. He must be of a younger generation in Dali's Duan family. He slowly nodded and said, I've always thought that the Duan family of Dali only specialized in their own ancestral martial arts. Only now do I know that a learned member of their latter generation made friends with the old man of Sing Siu and studied the strange martial arts technique known as the great art of energy dissipation. Strange, how very strange. Although his martial arts learning was profound and vast, even he mistook Duan Yu's divine art of the northern darkness as the great art of energy dissipation. Only wanting to conduct himself according to the dignity of his station, he changed old freak into old man and referring to Ding Chun Qiu. Likewise, the people of Wulin all considered the great art of energy dissipation as a vile art and an evil skill. He chose to describe it as a strange martial arts technique. Just now, in the brief exchange, he felt that Duan Yu's internal energy cultivation was definitely not inferior at all to that of Ding Chun Qiu, the old freak of Sing Siu. He definitely was not Ding Chun Qiu's disciple or student, and thus used the phrase made friends with. Serenity? What's up? Emperor Baoding let out a cold laugh. I've long heard that the enlightened lord of the Great Wheel was wise and far-sighted, flexible and accommodating, with extraordinary understanding and knowledge. I wouldn't have imagined he would say such absurd things. The old freak of Xingxiu is an expert at plotting and sneak attack, despicable and without shame. How can the sons of the Duan family possibly have any relationship with him? Jiumotsu's face reddened slightly and his heart trembled. The 8 words Emperor Baoding has used, plotting and sneak attacking, despicable and without shame, were clearly meant to refer to his own earlier actions. Duan Yu said, As you, the enlightened lord of the Great Wheel, have come from afar and are a guest of the Heavenly Dragon Monastery, we have received you with propriety and respect, but you dare offend my uncle? The only reason we had been showing forbearance and restraint at every turn is because everyone here is a disciple of Buddha, but you have only become more and more overbearing and arrogant. Who amongst Buddhist disciples is as flagrant in breaking monastic principles as you are? Everyone, hearing Duan Yu righteously castigate Jiumotsu, felt secretly grateful towards him. At the same time, they became even more on guard, fearing that Jiumotsu might suddenly fly into a rage and launch an attack against Duan Yu to harm him. They did not expect that Jiumotsu would remain calm and composed. He said, Today I have become acquainted with so many eminent personages. It has been my great fortune. I ask that you exchange a few stances with me as well, so as to allow this humble monk to gain great benefit from your tutelage. Duan Yu said, I don't know martial arts, and I've never learned it. Jimotsu laughed. Wise, wise, I take my leave. Leaning slightly, with a sweep of his sleeves, he struck out with both arms and simultaneously launched 4 attacks using his blazing flame saber technique, chopping towards Duan Yu. The enemy had just launched an attack on him, using his most ferocious skill, but Duan Yu remained muddle-headed and ignorant. Emperor Baoding and Bun Xiang struck out with their fingers simultaneously, receiving and blocking these 4 attacks from Jimotsu's blazing flame saber. Only under the sudden assault of Jimotsu's vigorous internal energy, both of their bodies swayed. Bun Xiang let out a wah cry and vomited out a mouthful of fresh blood. Ah, there goes the blood vomit. You gotta have those in a fight. Can't not have those. Only after seeing Bun Xiang vomit blood did Duan Yu understand that Jimotsu had just then launched yet another sneak attack. He was absolutely enraged. Pointing at Jimotsu's nose, he cursed. You couth, unreasonable barbarian monk! With his exertion of energy from his right index finger, his mind and his internal energy connected, and he naturally executed an attack from the Shangyang sword technique. His internal energy was extremely powerful. In this day and age, extremely few people had reached such a level. Just previously, he had studied the manuscripts of the Divine Sword of the 6 Meridians while hiding in front of Elder Kurong, and also watched the invisible sword fighting of the 7 elder monks. Now, as he struck out with his finger, his mind unconsciously followed the instructions on the manual. With a ch sound, a simple, vigorous, and incomparably powerful energy stabbed towards Jimotsu. Startled, Jimotsu hurriedly used a palm strike from the blazing flame blade technique to receive the attack. Duan Yu's attack not only surprised Jimotsu, it was also wildly out of expectations of Elder Kurong, Abbot Bunyin, and the others. The ones who were the most surprised of all were Emperor Baoding and Duan Yu himself. Duan Yu thought to himself, that was weird. I just pointed at him. Why did this monk act so hurriedly to block my point? Oh, I get it. It must be that I accidentally pointed at him in accordance with the techniques of the divine sword, and he thought that I knew how to use it. Since that's the case, I might as well scare him a bit. He loudly said, What's so remarkable about this Shanyang sword technique? Take a look at the Zhongchong sword techniques. As he spoke, he struck out with his middle finger. But this time, although his technique was correct, the internal energy did not rush out as it did before. He was just pointing aimlessly in the air without any actual effect. Jimotsu, seeing him strike out with his middle finger, immediately gathered his internal energy to resist the attack. He didn't expect that the attack didn't contain an ounce of internal energy. At first, he thought that his opponent was trying to confuse him, interchanging solid with void. He saw Duan Yu strike out a second time, but once again it was empty, and without any power behind it at all. He couldn't help but feel delight in his heart. He thought to himself, I was just wondering how someone who could use the Shaoxiang sword technique could also be able to use the Zhongchong sword technique. Looks like I was right. This kid is just bluffing. Scared me for a moment. During his trip to the Heavenly Dragon Monastery, he had fallen flat on his face, so to speak, several times in a row now. He thought to himself that if he didn't show off his power a bit, the fame and prestige of the enlightened Lord of the Great Wheel would suffer more than a bit of harm. His left palm immediately chopped towards both the left and the right, sealing off any rescue paths which Emperor Baoding and the others might use to aid Duan Yu. All right, Joshua. Thanks for joining. This technique, White Rainbow Pierces the Sun, was a marvelous and brilliant technique from his Blazing Flame Saber skill. He was intending to cut off Duan Yu's right arm with a single chop. Oh. Emperor Baoding, Bunyin, Bunsan, and the others cried out in unison, Careful! Each of them struck out with the finger towards Jimotsu. The three of them were naturally using the first-class martial arts principle of forcing an enemy into a position where he cannot help but withdraw to defend himself in their attack. Jiumotsu had already used his internal energy to protect all the critical points on his body. He didn't draw back his attack on Duan Yu in the slightest, and chopped perfectly straight down. Hearing the alarmed cries from Emperor Baoding and the others, Duan Yu knew that he was in a bad position. He pushed outwards vigorously with both hands, his mind in a state of panic. His internal energy naturally flowed out. The Shao Chong sword of his right hand and the Shao Zi sword of his left hand simultaneously struck out, dissolving the power of the stroke of the blazing flame saber aimed at him. There was still plenty of energy left over from his strike, and with a ch-ch sound, the two attacks counter-assaulted Jiumotsu. Jiumotsu didn't have time to think, immediately sending internal energy to his left hand to ward off the attack. After being provoked into striking out for the past few times, Duan Yu had the vague notion that it was necessary for one to first gather his internal energy and then agitate it to strike out with the finger. Only then could his internal strength and power be unleashed. But as to why this was the cause, he had no clue at all. He lightly struck out with his middle finger, once more shooting forth the Zhong Chong sword. In the blink of an eye, all of the techniques he had learned from the 6 manuscripts rushed to the front of his mind. All 10 of his fingers struck out continuously, attacking here and there in an inexhaustible onslaught. Jiumotsu was astounded and hurriedly generated his internal energy to resist the attacks. Sword chi crisscrossed the small room, and saber energy danced in the air. It was as though countless miniature thunderbolts or raging gales were repeatedly clashing against each other in midair. After fighting for a while, Jiumotsu felt as though his opponent's internal energy was only growing stronger and stronger, and his sword techniques were boundless, without fathom, as though creating new stances on the spot. It was totally different from his earlier fight with Wen Yin and Wen Xian and the others, where they were rigidly sticking to a preset formula. In contrast, the variations were much more difficult to predict and fathom. He was not aware that Duan Yu was not able to memorize all of the complicated changes and transformations within the sword techniques of the divine sword, and was simply randomly piercing and stabbing about in a critical situation, much less inventing new stances on the spot. In his heart, he was both shocked and regretful. The Heavenly Dragon Monastery actually has such a young and extraordinarily skilled master as this person. Today, I really did bring about my own humiliation. Suddenly, he struck out 3 times with 3 ch sounds before calling out, "Hold your hand!" Duan Yu's internal strength could not be generated or retracted at will. Upon hearing his opponent call for him to halt, he did not know how to cease, and so his only option was to raise his middle fingers and point them at the ceiling. He thought to himself, I should stop exerting my strength and hear what he has to say. Jiumotsu saw that a perplexed look was on Duan Yu's face as he stopped fighting. Earlier, when he was withdrawing his internal energy, Duan Yu acted as though he were baffled and did not know what the hell he was doing at all. Jiumotsu's heart was swayed, and he immediately leapt forward, striking towards Duan Yu's face with his fist. Only through great luck and fortune did Duan Yu manage to learn this highest martial arts technique, the divine sword of the 6 meridians. He didn't know any of the most basic empty-handed or weapon-based martial arts at all. Within this punch of Jiumotsu's was hidden 7 or 8 separate techniques. This was already a very powerful fist skill to begin with. Now, backed up by the might of the blazing flame saber's energy, it became an unfathomably deep and powerful stroke, impossible for even he himself to measure its strength. In the martial world, there was no martial artist at all who understood deep martial arts, but not superficial ones, who could comprehend complex martial arts, but not simple ones. Duan Yu was the only exception. Seeing Jiumotsu punch towards his face, he awkwardly stretched out his arm to block. Jiumotsu's right palm flipped over, seizing the Shun Feng acupoint on his chest. Duan Yu's entire body immediately felt limp, and he could no longer move. The Shun Feng acupoints belonged to the Zhu Shao Yin Shen group of acupoints, which he had never practiced in his study of the divine art of the Northern Darkness. Although Jiumozu discovered huge gaping flaws in Duan Yu's study of martial arts, he was unable to overcome Duan Yu's divine sword of the six meridians, and intended to use other high-level martial arts techniques to defeat him, but he never would have expected to be able to so easily capture him in a single attack. He was actually afraid that Duan Yu was just play acting and had some strange trick in mind. With his one hand on Duan Yu's Shun Feng acupoint, he immediately struck out with his other hand and sealed his Qi Chuan, Da Zui, and Jing Men acupoints. The acupoints belonged to the Jing Mai group, which Duan Yu also had never learned. Jiumozi retreated 3 steps. He said, "This young benefactor has memorized has memorized the method by which one might learn the divine sword of the 6 meridians. The original manuscript has already been burned by Elder Kurong. That makes this young benefactor a living manuscript. Burning him alive as a sacrifice in front of Mr. Murong's tomb will be just as good." Yo, what kind of a monk are you? He wants to burn this guy alive? Spreading out his left palm, he hurriedly made 5 chops in a row, then seized Duan Yu and dragged him out of the doorway and away from the Mooney Pavilion. Emperor Baoding, Bunyin, Bunguan, and the others wanted to rush forward and reclaim him, but were all sealed out by this chain of 5 chops, which Jiumozi made. There was no way for them to rescue him. With a toss, Jiumozi handed Duan Yu off to the 9 escorts, which stood guard outside the pavilion. He called out, "Let's go, quickly!" 2 of the escorts stretched their hands out simultaneously and caught Duan Yu. They did not leave the way they came in. Rather, apparently on their own initiative, they made their way out via the grove which surrounded the Mooney Pavilion. Jiumozi generated the power of his blazing flame blade and simply repeatedly hacked at the doorway of the Mooney Pavilion. Emperor Baoding and the others all urgently clashed the force of their Yi-Yang finger against Jiumozi's power, but were temporarily unable to break his invisible net of saber strikes. Jiumozi heard the sound of footsteps and knew that his 9 subordinates had already departed northwards with Duan Yu. He laughed long and loudly. Burning a living manual is superior to burning a lifeless manuscript. Now that Mr. Murong has someone to accompany him in the underworld, he won't feel lonely anymore. He made diagonal cuts with his right hand. With a ka-la-la sound, 2 of the pillars of the Mooney Pavilion were chopped in half. His body swayed slightly. Then, as though his body were nothing more than a breath of thin smoke, he flew towards the grove as well. In an instant, his location became indiscernible. Emperor Baoding and Buntan rushed out at the same time, only to see that Jiumozi was already long gone. Emperor Baoding said, "Hurry, chase him!" His gown fluttering in the wind, he had already moved many meters. Master Buntan and him were running shoulder to shoulder, picking up speed and pursuing northwards. And we're done. Alright, did you guys like that chapter? A lot of chi fighting in this chapter. But main takeaway is that Duan Yu just learned another powerful martial arts skill. He just keeps learning. He keeps on winning. He can't lose. Yeah. So he was beating this one dude. He was beating this Jiumozi guy. But then he got caught, and now he has been kidnapped. Ugh. Hold on. You enjoy my reading voice? Thanks, Phoenix. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. All right. Let's take a swig of some wine, and then we can end this. Ugh. Are these chapters getting longer? I feel like they're getting really long. The first chapters were a little bit shorter. I feel like we're getting really long. All right. Cheers. You'll be joining as often as you can. Awesome. Thanks, Serenity. All right, guys. Thanks for joining. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. Wait, no. I'll see you next week. I'll see you next week. All right, bye.